Hi all, Per-Ola Malmqvist at Utkiken here. I gave a talk on battery fires for the European Commission's Fire Information Exchange Platform, FIEP, in early March of 2021. Afterwards I was asked what the presentation was about, and since they were not recorded, I recorded it myself. So this is how it went. I'm a fire protection engineer from University of Lund and University of Maryland, combined with an operational fire training year at Swedish Rescue Services Agency. I got my rescue service background as a battalion chief at Helsingborg Fire Brigade. And then I started Utkiken, which is a fire information exchange platform for Sweden. But let's start with a look back in the history. The last major energy transition in the early 20th century. They had exactly the same challenges as we have today. The fire chief in Berlin kept statistics on fires in automobiles. It turned out that from 1905 to 1909 it burned in 138 petrol cars and only in 8 electric cars. The problems they had were, among other things, that the fire brigade did not know how to put out fires in petrol. Garages was not made for petrol cars. The garages was built for horses. And the authorities in Berlin saw this as such a big problem that their building department got involved in trying to find solutions to have fire-safe garages. And also, the fire brigade and fire protection were behind, and they tried to catch up and adapt to the technical development. If we now fast forward to today, then we have a new energy transition, where new types of energies have been developed to drive cars and other things. So what's the problem today with that? Well, the rescue services do not know how to put out the fires, not because of ignorance, but because most of those who develop new energy solutions do not work particularly well with the emergency services problem. Today's garages are not built to handle modern types of energy. The fire protection today, as it was then, is also playing catch up with the problem. Okay, let's talk more specifically about fires in lithium-ion batteries. There is a lot of information in this picture, but what I want to convey here is that hydrogen fluoride, which is one of the toxic gases formed when lithium-ion batteries burn, is an extremely toxic gas. It has a 10-minute value at 140 milligram per cubic meter. That is a value when you don't get life-threateningly injured or getting harmed for life. A burning electric car produces about 500 milligrams per second, which is about 30,000 milligrams per minute. And also that hydrogen fluoride is formed when other thing burns. For the example, in the blue rectangle you can see the peak when the AC fluid is burning. And hydrogen fluoride poisoning from burning batteries has occurred. In one case from Sweden, it was a burning electric bike battery that was the cause. The affected person was not in the smoke for many minutes, and he still had to be treated for several days at the intensive care unit. One problem to get a grip on whether it's a big problem with the toxicity or not is that there are different systems for handling the statistics, and that you probably need to do some form of research where you coordinate rescue service reports with smoke poisoning and the medical records of treatments and symptoms. The second challenge with lithium-ion batteries is the risk of explosion. Approximately 50% of the gas emitted in the form of smoke from a battery fire can be flammable, and thus also explosive in the right mixture. Here we see an experiment from the Finnish fire school, where you have thermal runaway in a smaller battery in a limited volume. And we have also seen explosions in real life. A Norwegian battery-powered road ferry, a major energy storage system in Arizona are two big examples. There have also been some minor explosions in garages where the fire have been described as explosive and where it seems probably when reading eyewitness accounts that it may actually have been an explosion from the battery. The third and very important property that battery fires have is that they have a completely different rate of heat release curve than a normal fire. Although today we often say that modern fires burn much faster than older fire, this fast fire process can be handled with the help of a smoke detector and a fire extinguisher or fire blanket. In this case, the smoke detector beeps after 36 seconds, and then the person goes and gets a fire blanket and can easily handle the fire. If we instead look at this process, where the man in an exemplary way pulls out the plug when it starts to come smoke from the hoverboard. So we see here that there is no way you can do something in a safe way to handle this fire by yourself. So when it comes to battery fires, and even quite small batteries like electric bikes and hoverboards, they need to be handled in a different way than we handle fires and train for fires today. Lithium-ion batteries are available in everything from mobile phones to buses, but I thought I'd give some brief comments on some battery-powered things here. If we look at the image at the top left, that is a UPS room, one where there are batteries that can power computers and other important things in a building in the event of a power failure. They are found in very many places today. This battery compartment here have standard lead-acid batteries. Probably the room is fireproof in a way that works well for lead-acid batteries. The problem today is that when you replace the batteries, they can very well be replaced with lithium-ion batteries without changing the fire protection conditions. And that is a decision that can be made by the electrician and the caretaker of the building without thinking that this gives the building completely new fire characteristics. The electric bike is also an interesting phenomenon. When people take their bike to work, you either take the bike or at least the battery with you and recharge it somewhere where you have an outlet, without thinking about how this affects evacuation in case of a fire. If you get a thermal runaway in a bike battery, that will easily block an exit that might be the only way out from the office. If we then look at the mobility scooter, this is a machine with probably a larger battery than we have on the e-bike that is also used by people who have a difficulty moving. If you start looking where they are normally parked, I think it's very common that is right inside the door to the home. And if that home is an apartment, that is also the only escape route from the apartment. Finally, the car. Here we have a big challenge, and that is that much of the knowledge that the fire and rescue service today have about putting out car fires, battery car fires, are not correct. Here we see a report where they examined whether the vehicle manufacturers recommend to put out fires in the battery. It has a few years on its neck, but this type of error still lives on. As you can see, the recommendations they have are the same recommendations that you would have for a metal fire. And that is not a correct recommendation. It might be that this recommendation comes from that you a little bit carelessly say that lithium batteries This is not a correct recommendation, and it is possible that it comes from the fact that you call lithium-ion batteries and lithium metal batteries both lithium batteries. The recommendations here would be correct for a lithium metal battery, but what we talk about are rechargeable batteries, and they are always lithium-ion batteries, and it is important to know the difference. This report also found that there were large differences between manufacturers, and these recommendations still live on. It seems that many car manufacturers have made a copy and paste on what someone else wrote without having the right expertise in the field of fire and fire extinguishing. Of course, there are exceptions. One good exception is Renault, which did a good fire test with the right expertise present. It was the Renault engineers together with firefighters. They made their batteries extinguishable through a smart, simple technical solution, and they wrote a detailed report where you could read exactly how they did and what they came up with. And finally, they made their report open to take part of. Unlike large parts of the automotive industry, which certainly has a lot of information that would be good for the fire and rescue service, but they keep it secret. So back to what's burning in a lithium-ion battery. The batteries I'm talking about here do not contain lithium as a metal. Lithium is instead dissolved in a flammable liquid in the form of ions. The flammable liquid is what forms the flammable gas when there is a thermal runaway. In addition, there is plastic and there are chemically bound oxygen along with an electric charge. This is what manufacturers' recommendation must be based on, scientific findings based on the right kind of batteries. In addition, there is a lack of clarity in what is meant by a battery when you read the fire and rescue recommendations from the manufacturers. Many recommendations say that you should cool the battery with large amounts of water for a long time. But what is a battery? Is this it? One of these interconnected battery cells? Or is it this? A battery module that contains several connected battery cells? The battery module is often encapsulated in some form of sheet metal. Or is it this? Multiple battery modules connected in one larger box. A box that is usually made of sheet metal and tight so that dirt and water can't enter. Or is it this? The battery box can have a thick protective plate below it to protect from damage from things lying on the road. The answer is that what needs to be cooled is the individual battery cells. Actually, the battery cells that have not yet started to have a thermal event. So those who are on the side of what is burning. And in the vast majority of cases, the battery enclosure is built so as not to let in any extinguishing agent that can cool this. Most manufacturers therefore recommend cooling the battery, even though it's not possible. An action that is like spraying water on the roof of a burning house. It looks good for the media, but does minimal benefit to the course of the fire. If we now continue to talk cars and the challenge of taking care of electric cars in parking garages, so I think this is a much bigger issue than just an electric car issue. Understand me right, electric cars in parking garages are a huge challenge for the rescue service to handle. But when talking about rules on fire protection, one must broaden the perspective and look at all the fuels that are used and can be used in the near future. We have pressure vessels with combustible gas. We have flammable gas that is stored as a liquid. We have hydrogen gas, which is also a combustible gas, but which is a little bit special with regard to flammability range and storage pressure. And now there's also talk of cars storing hydrogen in liquid phase. And in the area of fuel cells, which is what hydrogen is used for, people are looking at ammonia as a good carrier for hydrogen in the fuel cells. Ammonia is a very toxic gas. And add to all this that we still have petrol and diesel cars. And cars nowadays store petrol and diesel in plastic tanks that can burn in a different way than old-fashioned sheet metal tanks and spread the fuel running from the cars. Plus, today's vehicles contain twice as much plastic as cars did in the 1970s. And of course, that parking spaces bring in a lot of money, and that the cars are therefore parked more densely today than they were before. All in all, this is a good reason to think about fire protection in garages. Extra important in underground garages and garages combined with homes, hospitals, department stores, and other premises where people live. With that, I want to finish my presentation by saying thank you for listening, and at the same time point to a video I made together with Uppsala Fire Brigade, where I walk through a little more in detail about the science that is available about putting out battery cars and what recommendations you could use from them to put them out. Thank you.